I know a place where you can find the most exciting stories ever told and the most fascinating lessons ever taught. They're all right inside the Bible, waiting to be found. All you have to do to join the team is open it up, and you'll find all sorts of great Bible discoveries.
Welcome, Discovery Team. Come in. Look here. Such a sight awaits you. What a wonderful meal. What a wonderful night. A night of celebration. A night that we eat the Seder. What's the Seder, you ask? A Seder is the Passover meal. A meal that Jesus shared with his disciples, and a meal that our Jewish neighbors still celebrate to this very day. But what makes this meal different from all others? It's a meal that we eat on the Passover holiday. And a holiday is a day that we remember things. On Christmas, we remember Jesus' birth. On Easter, we remember Jesus rising from the dead. And on the Passover, we remember the greatest escape story in the Bible. The meal we eat tells the story of the escape. The Israelites, God's chosen people, were being held as slaves in the country of Egypt many years ago. They were looking for a way out of captivity. They wanted to find a way back home, but escape seemed impossible. Let's follow along to discover more about the Seder, answer questions about Passover, and follow the Israelites as they look for a way out.
The people of Israel had lived in Egypt for 400 years. At one time, they had been friends with the people of Egypt and had lived in peace, working side by side, raising families and growing prosperous in the land of the Egyptians. But that peaceful time had long since passed. A new king had come into power in Egypt, and he did not like the Israelites at all. He was afraid that there were too many Israelites, and that soon they would take over the land of Egypt. "Look at them all," King Pharaoh sneered. "We must control them somehow before they overpower us. There are already more of them in our land than there are Egyptians." So Pharaoh ordered that all the Israelites should be treated as slaves. He assigned slave drivers to watch over their work and forced them to make bricks and build up new Egyptian buildings. The Israelites cried out for help to the Lord. The Lord had promised to lead them out of the country of Egypt and out of slavery to a new land, a land that the Lord had promised to the Israelites hundreds of years before.
Many questions are asked at the Seder meal. Questions like, why do we eat bitter herbs? The answer to that question is easy. Bitter herbs remind us of the bitter life of slavery that the Israelites lived in Egypt. I know I would rather eat bitter food one night a year than to spend my whole life as a slave. Bitter food makes us hopeful for better food. When things in our life are bitter, we can be hopeful, like the Israelites, that God will make those things better.
A young Israelite farmer had already escaped from Egypt. His name was Moses, and he lived in the land of Midian with his wife and sons. Moses spent his days taking care of his sheep. One particular day, he led the sheep across the desert to Mount Horeb, which was known as the Mountain of God. There on the mountain, the Lord appeared to Moses in a burning bush. Now, seeing a bush on fire was not too surprising for Moses, but there was something odd about this fire, for though it burned on and on, the bush itself was not affected by the flames. It was as green and alive as ever. As Moses stepped forward to take a closer look, a voice called out to him, "Moses! Moses!" "Here I am," said Moses. He was scared stiff. "Take off your sandals, Moses. You are standing on holy ground."
I don't know about you, Discovery Team, but if I saw what Moses saw, I'd probably keep my sandals on and make tracks out of there. What would you do?
"I am God, the God of your people and your ancestors," the voice said. Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look at God. But God continued, "I have seen the mean things Pharaoh is doing to my people. I have heard their cries of pain. So I have come down to rescue them, show them a way out of Egypt, and lead them to the promised land of Canaan. And I'm sending you to lead them, Moses. You will go to Pharaoh and bring my people out of Egypt." I think you've got the wrong guy," Moses stuttered. "How can I go to Pharaoh, much less lead thousands of people out of Egypt?" "You will not be alone, Moses. I will go with you." But who are you? What if someone wants your name? What should I tell them?" Moses asked. "I am who I am," the voice said. "Tell the people that I am has sent you."
God calls himself I am. The Hebrew word for I am is Yahweh. That may sound like a strange name for God to have, but imagine God saying, "I am the God who created everything. I am the God of your ancestors. I am the God of Abraham and Isaac. And I am the God who will free you from slavery." That's a lot of good news, all wrapped up in a tiny name, I am. And it sounds like a step closer to a way out.
"What if the people do not believe that the Lord has sent me?" Moses said. The idea of being in charge of this huge escape was a little frightening to him. "Take that staff in your hand and throw it on the ground," the Lord instructed. Moses did, and it instantly turned into a snake. Moses backed off in a hurry. "Now grab the snake by the tail." Okay. Moses grabbed the snake and it turned back into his staff. "Use this sign to prove that I, the Lord, am working with you." "But Lord," Moses begged again, "I am not a good speaker. How can I go before Pharaoh and convince him to let the people go, much less speak in front of all of the people of Israel? I can barely finish a sentence as it is. Please, just send someone else to do all of this." "Your brother Aaron will go with you. He speaks well in public. I will tell you what to say, and you can tell Aaron. Then Aaron can use my words before Pharaoh and the people." So, reluctantly, Moses returned to Egypt, the land of slavery, and together with his brother Aaron, he told the people of Israel that Yahweh was providing a way out of Egypt. The people heard the words of the Lord and saw the staff turn into a stake. They believed that Moses was truly sent by God.
Well, this looks easy, Discovery Team. The people seem really eager to follow Moses out of Egypt, and Yahweh is leading the escape. I don't see how we could have any trouble finding a way out now. Soon it'll be time to celebrate and eat some of that great food.
Moses and Aaron went to the palace of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. God knew that Pharaoh was stubborn, and Moses and Aaron knew it too. But that didn't stop them. They marched right up to Pharaoh and said, "These are the words of Yahweh, the God of Israel. Let my people go. They must be free to worship me in the desert." Pharaoh laughed. "I don't know your Yahweh. Even if I did, I wouldn't let my slaves go. I like them right here working for me. Go back to your work, Moses and Aaron. How dare you suggest I give my slaves a rest?" Moses and Aaron did leave, and on that very day, Pharaoh told the slave drivers to increase the Israelites' work. "Don't give them any of the materials they need for making bricks. Make them gather the materials themselves, and tell them to produce the same amount of bricks as before." The Egyptians were even more cruel to the Israelite slaves, because the slaves could not make enough bricks. The slaves blamed Moses and Aaron. "Why have you made Pharaoh mad at us? We were better off before you came here talking about freedom." Moses called to the Lord. "Lord, ever since you sent me here to talk to Pharaoh, things have been going wrong, and you have done nothing to save the people."
Oh, boy, that didn't work, did it? Now the Pharaoh is meaner than ever, and the Israelites are worse off than they was before. If this is finding a way out, I sure don't get it. What would you think if you were an Israelite? Would you still believe in Moses? Would you still have faith in Yahweh?
God said to Moses, "Get ready, Moses, because now you are going to see what I am can do. I will send terrible disasters to the land of Egypt, so that the Pharaoh and all the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So Moses and Aaron went back before Pharaoh to demand that the Israelites be let go. Pharaoh would not listen. Aaron threw his staff to the ground, and it turned into a snake. Surely that would show Pharaoh God's power, but Pharaoh was not impressed. He had seen magicians perform the same trick. He kicked Moses and Aaron out of the palace. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh is being as stubborn as I told you he would be, so here's what I want you to do."
Psst, Discovery Team, over here. Sounds like God has an escape plan. I don't know if we're digging out or going over the wall, but pay close attention. We could find a way out at any time.
The next morning, Moses and Aaron stood on the shores of the Nile River. Pharaoh and all of his servants were watching, and Aaron lifted his staff and struck the water, just as the Lord had told him to do. At once the river turned to blood. The fish and everything in the water died, and there was a terrible smell all over the land of Egypt. P.U. The river had been the only source of water, but now the Egyptians wouldn't touch it, much less drink it. But the Pharaoh remained stubborn. He just turned around and rode back into his palace. The people of Egypt did not have clean water for 7 days. After this, the Lord said to Moses, "Have Aaron stretch his staff across the water again. I have another surprise for the Pharaoh." So Aaron did. And before you could say three-toed, tree-toed, there were frogs everywhere, frogs of every shape and size, all over the land of Egypt. Frogs croaking and hopping and leaping and bumping, so thick that you couldn't see the ground. Pharaoh called Moses. "Ugh," he said, "these frogs are hideous. Get rid of them, and the Israelites can leave Egypt and worship God somewhere else."
This looks like it, Discovery Team. Get ready to make a break for it.
Moses told Pharaoh that God would take the frogs away the next day. And God did. But once the frogs were gone, Pharaoh had no reason to let the slaves go.
Whoa, almost made it. I think I understand God's escape plan. Do you, Discovery Team? These plagues are going to drive Pharaoh so batty that he can't help but let the Israelites go. How much longer do you think Pharaoh can put up with these plagues that God is sending? Pay close attention and we'll find out.
So the Lord spoke to Moses again. "I'm not finished yet, Moses. Aaron must now strike his staff against the ground, so that I can turn the dust of the earth into gnats. The whole country of Egypt will be infested with gnats." Aaron did just as the Lord had instructed, and at once there were millions, no, billions of gnats everywhere, getting into people's eyes and ears and driving the animals crazy. Pharaoh thought it was just a trick, but not even the best magicians in all of Egypt could perform a trick like that. Pharaoh didn't care. Gnats or no gnats, he wasn't going to let his slaves go free. The next day, the Lord sent Moses to visit Pharaoh with this message: "Let my people go, or I will send a swarm of flies to the land of Egypt, so many that you will wish the frogs were still here. But the flies will only bother the Egyptians. The place where the Israelites live will be spared from this plague." And so it happened. In every nook and cranny throughout the Egyptian land, there were clouds of flies. They covered the food and the furniture and swarmed through the streets. But in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there was not a single fly. The Lord had shown that the Israelites were His chosen people.
Now God is getting down to business. The Lord is showing Pharaoh that the Israelites are God's special chosen people. Only the Egyptians are being affected by the plagues that God is sending. There's no denying that the Lord has the power to lead this escape. I only hope Pharaoh listens soon, before it's too late.
From his bug-infested palace, Pharaoh told Moses that the people of Israel could go, just as soon as all the flies were taken away. Moses said, "I will ask the Lord to remove the flies, but I hope for your sake, Pharaoh, that you won't go back on your word." The Lord did take the flies away from Egypt, but as soon as they were gone, Pharaoh changed his mind. The Israelites weren't going anywhere. Moses went back to Pharaoh and said, "Because you will not let the people of Israel go, the Lord will send a severe sickness to the livestock belonging to the Egyptians. All of the horses, camels, sheep, and donkeys left out in the field will die, but the animals of the Israelites will not become sick." The next day it happened. All of the Egyptian animals which were left outside had died, but not a single Israelite animal was harmed. And although this terrible plague had devastated the whole country, Pharaoh still remained stubborn. "I will not let the people of Israel go."
These plagues keep getting worse and worse, and Pharaoh gets more and more stubborn. He doesn't seem to realize that the people of Egypt are in real danger from the plagues. Sometimes being stubborn can lead to bad results, especially when you're stubborn against God. Are there any times when you don't want to listen to what God has to say?
The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Take a handful of dust and throw it into the sky. It will create a cloud over the land of Egypt and will cause boils on the skin of everyone it touches." So throughout the land of Egypt, the people were covered with horrible wounds. Even the magicians in Pharaoh's court were infected. But the Pharaoh wouldn't budge, and the Israelites weren't going anywhere. Then the Lord sent hail to the land of Egypt, the most terrible hailstorm ever known. Any person or plant or animal left outside was pounded by the hail. All of the Egyptian crops were ruined, but the hail did not touch the Israelites. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and warned him, "If you do not let the people go, the Lord will send a swarm of locusts to eat everything in the land of Egypt, all of the food saved from the hail and anything stored in your houses." But the Pharaoh threw them out of the palace. The next day the locusts did come. Never before had there been such a fierce swarm, and there never will be again. They looked like a black cloud over the land, and they ate up every piece of food in Egypt. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned, and the Lord of the Israelites is punishing me. Please take these locusts away, and I promise to let the Israelites go."
Perhaps Pharaoh has finally learned his lesson. The country of Egypt is in shambles. The hail and locusts have destroyed everything. This has got to be the last straw. Pharaoh has to change his evil ways so that the Israelites and all of us can finally find our way out of here.
But once the Lord took the locusts away, the Pharaoh went back on his word. The Israelites were not allowed to leave. The Lord sent another plague to Egypt. This time it was a plague of darkness. All over Egypt the sky grew black. It was so dark that the people couldn't even walk around. For 3 days, not even a torchlight could break through the darkness. Where the Israelites lived, however, there was no darkness at all. Pharaoh said, "Take the slaves and get out of Egypt, but leave your animals behind." Pharaoh knew the Israelites couldn't go far without their animals. But Moses said, "No deal."
You tell him, Moses, if my snowball ain't going, ain't nobody going. Ain't that right, Snowball? No highfalutin Pharaoh's gonna tell me whether Snowball can go or not. No, sir.
Pharaoh grew furious. He threw Moses out of the palace and said, "Never come in here again. If you do, I will kill you." Moses replied, "It's a deal, Pharaoh. You'll never see me again. But before I go, you should know that the Lord is sending one more plague to you, Pharaoh, and the whole country of Egypt. And after this plague, you will not just let the slaves go free, you will beg us to go. The Lord will come at midnight and will kill every oldest child in Egypt, from the Pharaoh's son right down to the child of a servant girl. The people of Egypt will cry like never before. But nothing at all will happen to the Israelites, proving that the Lord will take care of his chosen people. Then everyone in Egypt will practically beg us to leave. When that happens, I'm out of here." And with that, Moses stormed away.
Come on, Snowball. I reckon it's time to get ready to go. God's up to something big, and I don't think we should be out in the open when it happens.
Moses called the leaders of Israel. God was going to carry out the most terrifying part of the escape plan, and the Israelites had to be ready. "It's time to go," Moses said. "Prepare your things, just as the Lord has told us to do, and be set to move when the time comes. Follow the Lord's instructions to the letter, and this will be the greatest escape in history." The people scattered to their houses. All of the Israelites knew the escape plan. Each person had a job in order to get ready, and everyone prayed that the Lord would come through.
This is it, Discovery Team, the big event we've been waiting for. God wants the Israelites to be ready at a moment's notice. No last-minute plans or preparations. And what do you suppose was God's secret recipe for escape? Do you think they went to gather weapons and fight their way to freedom? Or perhaps gather shovels and dig their way out? Well, what would you say if I told you that God's secret escape plan was to cook a glorious roast lamb dinner?
The Lord had instructed them, "On the 10th of this month, every family should pick out a lamb for themselves, a perfect lamb, just 1 year old. If one lamb is too much for a family, then share it with a neighbor." 4 days later, all of the Israelites should gather together at twilight, and they should prepare the lambs to be eaten for the feast without breaking a single bone. Now this part is very important. Everyone should take some of the blood from their lamb and sprinkle it on the doorpost of their home, making sure there is enough to be seen easily. Then go indoors and don't come out till morning. That night, everyone should roast their lamb and eat it with bitter herbs. You won't have any time to let your bread rise, so eat it without any yeast. Eat the whole thing in one night. Any leftovers should be thrown into the fire. "I want you to eat it with your travel clothes on," the Lord said. "No one should be relaxed. Have your sandals buckled and your belts on tight, because when I give you the sign, we're gonna move."
Why do we eat unleavened bread? And why do we eat reclining on pillows? I'm so glad you asked those questions. Would you believe that there was no time for the bread to rise on that first Passover? It can take up to 8 hours for normal bread to rise, and the Israelites didn't have time to wait. Solution? Unleavened bread. It's made without yeast, so it doesn't have to rise. Of course, it's flat as a pancake, but it makes a great side dish. And why the pillows? What would you say if I were to tell you that the Israelites ate the first Passover meal standing up and with their travel clothes on? Now, for most dinner parties, this is a definite no-no. But then again, I'm not trying to escape slavery. Nowadays, it's a much more relaxed atmosphere, so it's a pillow for every guest, and always, always candlelight.
This escape is going to be so great that I don't want you to forget it. Every year you will celebrate by eating unleavened bread for a week and by preparing a lamb for the feast, just as you're doing now. If your children ask what this meal means, you will tell them that this is the Passover, a sacrifice made to remember that when the Lord struck down the Egyptians, he passed over the houses of the Israelites.
Why is this night so different from all others? Because this is the night the Lord has planned for the great escape. The blood on the doorposts marks the homes of the Israelites, the homes of the people who love the Lord, the homes that will not be punished. But the homes of the Egyptians, what do you suppose will happen to them?
Each Israelite was behind locked and painted doors, quickly eating their meal and patiently waiting for the sign from God. At midnight, the angel of the Lord swept through the whole country like a dark cloud, passing by the homes where lamb's blood marked the door, but visiting the other homes with terrible sadness. For in every Egyptian home there was death. Each firstborn child in each household had been killed, from the firstborn child of Pharaoh right down to the firstborn of all the animals. All the Egyptians woke up to the sound of tears and wailing. Pharaoh sat in utter grief. His own child was dead. He immediately called Moses and Aaron. "Go," he said, "take all of the Israelites and get out of here. I never want to see any of you again." That was all it took. The moment the Israelites heard they could go, they gathered up and left the country. Over 600,000 families in all. Most left so fast they forgot to pack a meal for the journey. They had stayed in Egypt a total of 430 years. And they all left in one night, the night of the Passover, a victorious night that the Israelites could celebrate for generations to come.
The blood of the Lamb has saved the Israelites. Does that sound familiar? Jesus calls himself the Lamb of God. His blood saves us from sin and death, just as the blood saved the Israelites from death on Passover. We remember the escape from Egypt when we eat the Seder, and we remember our escape from sin when we eat the Lord's Supper.
As they left Egypt, the people followed the Lord. The Lord formed a pillar of smoke to lead by day, and a pillar of fire to lead by night. After several days, they reached the Red Sea and camped by its shores. Back in Egypt, the Pharaoh was furious. "What have I done?" he cried. "Why have I freed my slaves? I must have been insane with grief." So he immediately ordered his army of chariots to chase after the Israelites. Every soldier in Egypt rode out in hot pursuit, and soon they spotted the Israelites camped by the sea.
This guy doesn't know when to quit. Can you believe how mad that Pharaoh must be? Someone's got to warn Moses, because Pharaoh's coming, and Pharaoh is out of control, and the Israelites are trapped by the Red Sea. It looks like our way out is nothing but a dead end. Oh!
The Israelites saw them coming and knew that they were trapped. "What have you done, Moses?" they screamed. "Did you lead us out of Egypt just so we could die here in the desert? We were better off when we were slaves." "Fear not," Moses cheered. "Today you will see the Lord win the greatest victory ever. The Lord himself will fight against the Egyptians, and you'll never have to worry about them again." The pillar of clouds that had been in front of the Israelites moved back to surround the Egyptians so that they could no longer see where they were going. Just then, Moses lifted his staff above the water. The Lord sent a strong wind to blow on the sea, and the sea split in half, making a pathway of dry land for the Israelites to walk on. The whole crowd of Israelites walked on dry ground between two huge walls of water. Moses, Aaron, and the Lord led the way.
Why do we dip parsley into salt water? The parsley reminds us of the fresh young nation of Israel. The salt water reminds us of the sea. We dip the parsley to remind us how God provided another way out for the Israelites, straight through the sea. The Israelites had an escape route right through the water.
Close behind, Pharaoh and the Egyptian army charged through the cloud of smoke and followed the Israelites into the sea. As Moses and the Israelites reached the opposite shore, the Lord told him to raise his staff over the water again. At once, the sea came rushing back into place, sweeping the Pharaoh and the entire Egyptian army under a wall of crashing water. Not a single chariot escaped. When the Israelites saw how God had defeated the Egyptians, they immediately believed in the Lord and in everything Moses said. Then Moses and the Israelites sang a song of praise to the Lord, a song that they still sing to this very day. "I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea." And year after year, from that day forward, the people of Israel celebrate the feast which the Lord had instructed them to eat, the feast they prepared for the greatest escape ever, the feast by which the Egyptians were punished and the chosen people of Israel were spared, the feast of the Passover, the feast that gave God's people the way out.
They did it! They found the way out! And we did it too, Discovery Team, just as Moses and the Israelites did. We had a bit of trouble with Pharaoh, but the discovery was right in front of us the whole time. God wanted the chosen people to find their way out of Egypt, away from Pharaoh and away from slavery. And God provided the Passover meal so that year after year the people of Israel would remember that God truly did provide the way out. We're God's chosen people too. And God has given us a way out. God helps us escape from sin and the devil. And we have a good leader, even better than Moses. We have Jesus to lead the way to the promised land, heaven. And Jesus has given us a meal too. The Lord's Supper reminds us that Jesus died and rose again to help us find the way out. Those are great discoveries, and they're easy to find right inside the Bible. Just let Jesus lead, and you're sure to find the way. So goodbye for now, until I see you again for more great Bible discoveries.